Hi, it's Ileana. So I've been given new remote viewing targets. They were blind targets over the last couple of weeks. I was tasked to remote view Swan F2, K1 Atlas, A6 Lemmon, and Neo 2. These are other interstellar bodies similar to 3i Atlas and Swan R2. These crafts, they're also crafts. They may look like comets for what our telescopes can pick up, but they're different shapes of interstellar crafts that have crystalline technologies on them, plasmatic, and different types of beings, like humanoid type beings that have also parts of crystalline energy as their frequency and their organic proportions. And they are explorers. They are tracking ancient relics, ancient probes, ancient technology that was launched millions of years ago by advanced civilizations. And they're studying this technology, these ancient artifacts in space. They're studying planets, evolving beings, evolution, how living beings can evolve on different planets, whether they were seeded here or whether they organically evolved out of the petri dish. Sometimes there's accidental evolution on different planets and things just start growing, evolving. And on most planets, beings have been seeded, life forms, but there are differences. So they're studying that. And a reference came back to Swan R2 as well in these remote viewings. So there's various types of beings on these crafts. So, and reptilians did come up. So for Swan R2 and Swan F2, there were some predatory type reptilians that were on it, pockets in node systems of the crafts, not large amounts of reptilians on any of the crafts, but Swan R2 and Swan F2, they were flagged as having predatory signatures of beings, the reptilians, because the signatures that they were sort of, I guess, protecting these reptilians on their part of the ships, that wasn't a clean frequency. So that frequency could potentially impact humans negatively, like it could create negative impacts in our blueprints and our evolution of genetics. So it could cause de-evolution if those signals ever reached us from these crafts. So humanoid factions of what is called the secret space programs. So they had launched crews on probe crafts to literally go in, board those crafts, Swan R2 and Swan F2, and disable those systems that were creating those signals, the nodes on the crafts. And like, why would evolving species, crystalline beings that are on these crafts, why would you need secret space program humanoid crews to come on the crafts and disable the reptilian stuff, what the SSP flagged as threats? Because these beings are all in sections of the crafts in their own parts of the sections. Yes, they're very advanced, evolved, but it's hard to track reptilians. It's hard to, they're elusive. They can shield themselves and it's hard to track them. So it takes time to find them and it takes time to disable that kind of stuff. And what the SSP crews did, they quarantined the signal, the nodes, the waveform and waveguide of these signals from Swan R2 and Swan F2. And they disabled the reptilian nodes and they I guess, removed the reptilians off the crafts. Like, the reptilians went into another dimensional pocket, actually. So they weren't a huge threat, and they were quarantined. So it's considered the problem is taken care of. They've been removed because they're no longer on the craft. The SSP crews basically sealed off that dimensional pocket once the reptilians went into it. So the reptilians can't come back on Swan R2 or Swan F2. Those node pockets of that other dimension basically are sealed like forever, energetically and physically sealed. So they cannot come back to the crafts. And that's what I mean that the SSP crews basically, took the reptilians off the crafts. They made sure that, again, I guess those energetic portal signatures can't be opened up to that other dimension where those reptilians are now that they went to. They physically didn't take the reptilians off the crafts. That wasn't the priority of what they were doing there, but they had to get the reptilians off the crafts, and they knew the reptilians would go themselves because, again, reptilians have the ability, some of them, to open energetic pockets in space, even on crafts, and I guess leave the crafts because their technological nodes for sending very corrupted signals are now disabled and totally dismantled. That's no longer of use to them, so they need to leave the craft, and they did. The SSP crews made sure they left the craft physically and could not come back. They scanned the crafts constantly after they left them to make sure there was no reptilian presence, negative presence of any type or Draco reptilians, that none of these beings could come back on these crafts, hiding in pockets of energetic nodes where they were. So they did make sure that happened. So that's what the remote viewing findings revealed. Secret space program crews, they have their own waveguide nullification and diffusion probes that they first used on Swan R2 and Swan F2 to disable the frequency nodes where the reptilian signals were coming from on both crafts. Then they boarded the crafts and basically made sure that nothing of that node technology was left on the crafts and that nothing was connected to any of the crystalline frequencies on the crafts so that it couldn't spread elsewhere on the craft and no signals were being sent out from the craft to Earth or anywhere else to infect DNA or humanity with anything negative that was contaminants of those signals. 3-Eye Atlas. Also, there was echo of 3-Eye Atlas in these remote viewings, that the reptilians are archivists. They modulate the craft to make sure it functions correctly. They archive information, artifacts, planetary systems, like they're archivists. So they're not a threat to humanity. The reptilians that I originally sensed on 3-Eye Atlas, not a threat to humanity. They weren't taken out, or 3-Eye Atlas wasn't boarded, was not quarantined, but Swan R2 and Swan F2 were quarantined, boarded, and reptilians, basically they found their nodes and the reptilians went into another dimensional pocket and are not on the craft anymore. There weren't any battles, skirmishes. It wasn't anything huge. So the humanoid SSP factions that are on Mars, on the moon, in deep space stations, monitoring different crafts that are coming in and out, like they're monitoring 3-Eye Atlas, they're monitoring Swan R2, Swan F2. They're monitoring Ki Atlas, they're monitoring A6 Lemmon and Neo 2. And so Ki Atlas, A6 Lemmon, and Neo 2 also had pockets of reptilian frequencies and presences that weren't threatening. So those crafts weren't flagged. K1 Atlas, A6 Lemmon, and Neo 2, they weren't flagged with threatening reptilian presence. But there was that predatory, somewhat predatory energy in Swan R2 and Swan F2. And the targets I was given was to remote view whichever types of beings are on all those crafts, and also afterwards remote viewing targets, also blind targets that were specifically focused on remote viewing reptilians. Are there Draco presences on these crafts? And it doesn't read like Draco's presence, like maybe ancestors, but different kinds of reptilians, not the predatory Draco themselves. That's not what the remote viewings still reveal. It's like trying to find Draco energy, but getting energy of reptilians, but not Draco infestation. So Swan R2 and Swan F2, the reptilians have abilities to mind control and try to influence the crews, but they're so limited in how many they are on these crews. It's like you have to quarantine that, but they can't make these crafts a huge threat to humanity. They can't weaponize them. So the SSP was concerned about quarantine and disabling the node signals so it doesn't impact humans into devolving humans on Earth, on the moon, on Mars. So basically, that can't happen. That's been neutralized. This stuff is not blue beam technology. It's not heading to Earth to invade it. It's not going to impact Earth. 3i Atlas is not heading close to Earth. It's not going to break up on impact. That's not happening. So all of these rumors and fear-mongering is not accurate. That's not going to happen. On October 29th, 2025, we're not going to have any doomsday events. We might have some solar energy happening, some intense energy, but it's not going to be war of the worlds. That's not going to happen. There's more than one interstellar object in our solar system right now. There's several of them out there, and they're being monitored and scanned to make sure they're no threat to Earth. That's why there's secret space programs, crews, factions, humanoids. That stuff has been here almost 100 years. And they have the technology to monitor everything that's coming in here, in our solar system, in our galaxy, and it's all tracked. They won't let something invade Earth. That's not going to happen. That's why they're called the secret SSP, because that's the work they do. Some of those factions are negative and predatory themselves. Some are more neutral. I don't think they're all benevolent. I wouldn't say that, but Solar Warden's job is still to protect humanity, to protect this planet, to do their work. And I think they are doing their work. So this is the latest updates that I have on all of this. And I've been doing these remote viewings for several weeks. It was a lot of data, images, what these crafts look like, why they're here. Most of them are just here for exploration and study, and to archive data and information. They're travelers, they're explorers. And some of these crafts do travel fast. They're not super slow, and they're advanced crystalline technologies on these crafts. So I just wanted to share that. Thank you so much.